Good afternoon. Welcome to the No Grant, No Worries, Getting Your Project Shovel Ready presentation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Darug and Darkinjung people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people who may be with us today. And welcome to you all. No doubt you're ready to commence your grant journey, or you've been there, done that, and are after some tips. So hopefully I can answer some questions for you today or give you a slightly different perspective. So just to start, a little bit about me. I've been writing grants in the consultancy business since 1996. I started off with very much a marketing approach and specialised in marketing. And I found that I had more and more people asking me to write stuff. So I found that my niche is getting stuff that's in people's heads down onto paper in some sort of logical, and compelling way. So whether that's grant applications, business plans, etc. So that's what I do and thoroughly enjoy it because it's so diverse. The structure of today's presentation is really around the what, why, how, where, when and who of writing a grant when there's no grant available. So let's start. The what. What is No Grant, No Worries all about? And to me, it's about being an optimist, but being a very organised optimist. You're fleshing out your project as if you already have the money in the bank. And that's certainly a definition of optimism. The idea of the approach is that you're bringing your whole project to life in a very thoughtful and managed way. You don't have that time pressure of a deadline, of a grant deadline, 2 minutes to midnight to get the thing submitted. You actually can really think through the ins and outs of your project. There is no right and wrong at this stage. You're the only one, you're the expert in your project, you know and have an idea of what's going to work for your community or for your project. So really it's just getting everything down onto paper. You're starting to formulate your ideas and your dreams. So get them out of your head and get them down onto paper where they will actually start to become more real, and you can approach them in a more realistic way rather than just hoping and dreaming all the time. I'm the first to admit that this approach may not generate any money for you in the short term. So don't think you're going to work through this process and then you're going to receive bucket loads of money or tons of opportunities. But what it is doing is setting you up really well, very strongly for any future grant opportunities. So you're actually writing that grant application in detail and you're researching it as well without having a grant at this stage. So that's what I mean about being optimistic. So why do this? Why approach it this way? Why not just wait? And I think that the big benefit of approaching a grant, no worries, is that you're ready to jump as soon as that grant opens. Sometimes, and I'm not sure if they do it on purpose, but sometimes grant funders only give us a really short window to apply, maybe 2 weeks. And then, if you stumble across it in the actual grant opportunity in a newspaper and email, that could even be a shorter time frame. So if you've done all that pre-thinking in the first place, you're ready to jump. So even if you've only got 2 weeks, you've done the bulk of the legwork. So there's not only that, but it also saves you time. You've done that really solid strategic thinking in advance in a realistic and unhurried way. You don't have the time pressure, which often means a lot of stress as well. So my approach, this No Grant, No Worries, will also save you stress. Another important benefit is approaching it with doing all this pre-work means that it gives you an opportunity to start thinking about building some alliances and partnerships. Sometimes there is strength in numbers, and think about doing a joint application rather than just flying solo. So if that's the case, all of a sudden you've got some really valuable non-pressure time to start having a cup of coffee with like-minded groups of people and starting to flesh out the idea or the concept of working together. So building that alliances and partnerships is very strong. It's also funders, departments, whoever's providing the grant money, they love to see partnerships, particularly public-private partnerships. So could your, say, not-for-profit community group also be partnering with the Rotary Club and maybe council, and maybe there's a local business that will become involved and give you some money as well. So you're actually building that strategic partnership in advance. People don't have to hand over their cold hard cash, but there has to be a commitment to work on this project together. As I said, funders love this. And when it comes down to comparing, you know, eventually when you've got a grant program opens and you can apply, when a funder is reviewing applications, and say your application is here and you're level pegging with another one, having that public-private partnership or those strategic alliances will actually give your project the edge. It is a competitive advantage. So don't think that you just have to be the Lone Ranger on this and develop your project on your own. There may be opportunities and benefits in actually joining with somebody else. It also gives you time, by working now, thinking now, it gives you time to talk to influencers. And that's anyone that could positively or negatively impact on your project. Starting those informal conversations, no commitment, no obligation, but actually just talking through where the opportunities or where the blockages may be. Importantly, one of those influencers could be your local MP. And I'm always talking to my clients about, if you've got a really exciting project, a really solid project that's going to benefit your community or business, get it on your MP's radar. They really should be working for us, and they should be opening doors for grant funds, or, you know, making sure that we can bring our ideas to life. They can't do that unless they know what you're planning. So make sure that they are fully across what your aspirations are, and also the amount of money that you're after as well, in case some bucket of money turns up and they can point you in the right direction, link the two of you up. So talk to your influencers. So gather all those ideas, great ideas, get them down onto paper, and you're starting to get some structure about those dreams, and you're starting to turn them into reality. When you've got that really no rose-coloured glasses view of your project, it makes it much easier to make that go, no-go decision. Go, yep, this is great. Everything seems to be falling into place. You've got all the information you need. You're really confident that this will be a very, very positive project. Great. Or is it a no-go decision? All that pre-thinking and research that you've done, have you spotted some flaws, some weaknesses in your project? That's not a problem. Remember, I've said there's no right and wrong answer at this stage. But now, if you're still keen, you've got time to fix those flaws. So you've got time to go in and tweak it and work out where it can be improved or changed to become a more successful project in the future. So you can actually go back and fix things before you've submitted the proper grant application, so to speak. You're also seeing your budgets and your numbers in the cold, hard light of day. And what I mean by that is, you might think a project's going to cost you $50,000 or $5,000 or whatever the amount is, but when you get it all down on paper, all of a sudden it might show you that your project's going to cost you $100,000. It just makes you just take off those rose-coloured glasses a little bit and be a bit more realistic about what your project is going to cost. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but you need to be, as far as, you know, blowing out the budget at this stage, but you need to ask yourself the question, is your ask, so that dollar ask, is it realistic, and is it going to be value for money for a potential funder? Is it going to be value for money for your community as well? So think about, if you were sitting on the other side of the desk, how you would view you asking for that amount of money and the benefits that you will return. It's just a different way of thinking about your project. Approaching grants, as in no grant, no worries, is also a really great way to fire up your group and get them thinking of the future and working proactively. I've been on many community groups myself. I know the dynamic can be challenging around the community, the group table sometimes, the management table. But all of a sudden, if you've got something that people can get their teeth into, and rather than sitting and twiddling their thumbs, that you've got this project that people can be working on, etc., and getting excited about, it really does help to develop some solid buy-in from your group members. So now let's talk about the how. What's the how of grant, no worries, and how to get the process going. If you haven't already identified a project, start a conversation in your group or in your business about what you would like to achieve and what the priorities are. No doubt, I have no doubt you've probably already got 5 projects or 50 projects in the back of your mind that you would like to get off the ground. But if you haven't, start that conversation about where the biggest bang or the biggest impact for your community or group would be. So if you develop this great long list, narrow it down to your top 3 or your top 1 project. And I really encourage you to focus on the one that will deliver the biggest impact to your community or your group. And why I say that is because, as you would know if you've written grants, they're very time intensive and it really does take a big commitment to pull it together by a deadline. Similarly, even though we don't have a deadline, with no grant, no worries, if you approach it in a serious way, it still means a time commitment. And I don't want you wasting your time. I want you to be fleshing out the most exciting and the most positive project you can. So that's why I suggest that you narrow it down to that top 1 and invest your time wisely. If there's nothing, no grant that's stumbled across in front of your desk or in your email that's caught your eye, I really encourage you to get online and start Googling around for that ideal grant program. And what I mean by that is if it was open, you would be in there applying straight away. And why I encourage you to do that is because I then want you to download both the application and the guidelines. So sometimes, or most times, grant programs will have a sample application uploaded on the website. Grab a copy of that and grab a copy of the guidelines. We're going to work on that in a second. And so these guidelines, they may change, your application may change. If they offer this grant program again, it may not be exactly the same. It might have slightly different focus, they might have slightly different objectives, but the key headings will be the same. And that's what I want you to understand, is using the key headings in the guidelines and the application to guide your thinking, guide your research, and guide your writing. So you've got the guidelines in front of you, and I want you to, and I know they're not gripping reading a lot of the time, but you really need to read them in detail and potentially read them a couple of times. And particularly the areas around assessment criteria and scoring. In the assessment criteria, which we'll get into a little bit later on, what they're trying to do is when funders are looking at grant applications, their first pass will be to see whether you are eligible in the first place. And that'll be almost like a tick and flick sort of a process. So that will weed out a whole bunch of application that sort of go straight to the bin. The others will then come down to this assessment criteria and scoring. Often they're the most time-intensive questions as far as writing is concerned, and really selling your passion and selling the benefits of your project. And these are scored. So you need to understand that these, 3, 5, however many assessment criteria in there may be worth 25 marks each. So understanding that you need to try and nail as many of those points as possible. Again, going back to that competition, if your application is scored 75 out of 100, somebody else has got 65, theoretically yours should get up. So this concept of scoring and competition is really important to understand and keep in the back of your mind as you're renewing it all. So what that review of the guidelines should start to show you what you should be focusing on with your information gathering and also your writing. And you'll start to see patterns in there and keywords bubbling up all the time. It could be sustainability, it could be capacity building, it could be environmental revegetation, or it could be job creation or economic development. Whatever those words are should be ringing bells in your brain, thinking my project needs to actually nail some of these descriptive words to be eligible and to capture their attention. I also encourage you, so that's around the guidelines. Now talking about the application, I really encourage you to copy and paste that into Word, into a Word document or whatever writing software you like to use, and use that Word document as your brain dump. Go in there and just throw ideas down under those key headings and start to, as I say, get all that stuff out of your head down into your Word document, and you will start to see that sections will start to flesh out as you add more and more and more. Chunk it down, tackle a section at a time when you've got half an hour or an hour, and don't try and do this in one sitting, or it'll do your head in if you try and write it in one sitting. Just keep coming back to it and go, oh, I remember I can do this, or I can add that, or this is an opportunity here. Because again, there's no right or wrong at this stage. Just keep adding it and enhancing. You can go back and wordsmith later. Just get your ideas down. I love that concept of, which I'm not sure if you've heard of, how do you eat an elephant? It's basically just one mouthful at a time, and grant applications are great big elephants. And if you stand back and look at them and you think, oh my God, this is too overwhelming, I understand that. But if you just do a section at a time, then you'll be able to just chip away at it, and you'll be amazed at how much progress you make, sorry. The other concept with no grant, no worries is that this is a marathon, not a sprint. A sprint is when you've got that deadline looming, you've got the fire under your backside, you've got to hit submit by 5 p.m. on Friday or whatever it is. That's the sprint. All of a sudden, we can step away from that, and we're actually talking about a marathon, and we can run a far more strategic race if we've got time by doing our pre-thinking in advance. Okay, so now we're going to take that ideal grant application that you've downloaded, and we're going to work through this so you can get an idea of what sort of information you should be gathering and thinking about as you're fleshing out your proposed project. So this is, I actually just took this off a major grant that was online. It was a recent one. And again, bear in mind, things might change slightly, but the overall headings and sections will remain the same. So the first section is always what I call the housekeeping section. And it's really those, basic nuts and boltsy type details, ABNs, postal address, locations, bank details, all those sorts of things. Bear in mind, I highlighted their main contacts for the application. That person might be different to the president of your organisation or the treasurer or the secretary. It's the person who knows most about the application and could potentially run the project when it gets up and running, or could answer questions about it. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That could be different people. The other thing is to think about is you may need to provide these things like the bank details, copies of any audit documents or financial statements, insurances, constitution. You don't need to have them right now, don't have them on hand, but you must know where to find them. So that all of a sudden the grant opens and you go, yep, I've got to get this from the treasurer, that from the secretary. I know, my accountants have these details, so you can quickly pull it all together. So it's more of a research thing. And I've worked with groups before when we've been busily writing away and developing the application. I said, right, now I need a copy of your constitution. And, a few days later, they've come back to me and said, can't really find our constitution. It's been lost in the midst of time. So so it's just a way of being organised in advance. So thinking in advance. The next main section that you will have to address moving into a proper grant application is around the project information, and they'll often break it down into a number of different sections. They want a title, and of course they'll limit the number of words you can put in the title. They want a brief description. and then they want a detailed description. What I recommend you do, and if your brain works similar way to mine, is actually work in reverse. So write your project description, your 200 words, and go into your detail, etc. When you're happy with that, distill that down to your brief project description. So take the most relevant 20 or 30 words, and that's your brief project description. And from that, a really punchy and catchy title of 10 words should leap out at you. So work in reverse. And again, in that Word document, you're just doing this brain dump. So don't worry if you haven't got your words perfect at this stage. It will come together. The other issue to think they often ask you about is your project outcomes. And what that means is the change you're going to bring about. So are you going to be improving mental health outcomes? Are you going to be upskilling the workforce? Are you going to be increasing access to adult education, or whatever it is? It's that change that you're going to bring about, the benefits of your project, not the outputs. Outputs is all about the measurables. So 3 new classrooms, a 2-acre vegetable patch, 400 metres of fencing or whatever. The outputs are measurables, those really hard and fast measurables. The outcomes is the change you're going to bring about. The next section is around timing and milestones. So when will your project start and when will it be completed? Again, we're thinking in advance, we're dreaming here as far as when we would like to kick our project off. Nothing wrong with that. The only thing you need to be conscious of is if you start spending money before your grant is open, you cannot ask for money to cover those expenses. So that's called retrospective funding. 99% of funders will not fund retrospectively. They'll only fund in advance. So while you're enthusiastic and you might get a windfall of money and all that sort of stuff to start working, that's exciting and go for it. But don't think you can then actually dip into the funding can further down the track to cover those expenses. Just a word of warning there. The other thing they'll often ask about in these sections are the milestones. So they're the really big activities, I guess, and there's some timing attached to that. So we're going to have some designs done for our building, and then we need to lodge a DA. We're actually also going to employ a project coordinator who we need to recruit, and we need to write a job description. We're going to pour a slab, or we'll do earthworks, etc. So it's those really big activities that will show progress of your project. And what I recommend you do, I'm quite a visual person, so sometimes it's easier for me to lay it out. And I recommend that you do something like this. This one I've actually just cut and pasted from the website, so from the internet. So it's a little bit American. But in Excel or a Word document, if that works better for you. But in Excel, I prefer you put your dates, your weeks across the top, so months and weeks across the top axis, and then all the major tasks all the way down that left-hand column. And then start colouring in the boxes, which you can do in Excel or Word, with the length of time it will take. So 1.5 boxes, 2 boxes for 2 weeks, etc. And all of a sudden, you've got this quite powerful and clear workflow for your project. And it's amazing how many times I've done it and I've been working with a client and they've gone, oh, we forgot to do X, and then you can just insert a task above and you'll need to rejig your time frame. So this is, as I say, this is a really clear way, not only for you to think through your project, it's also a great way to track your project once you've received your funding and you're underway. You could almost use this as a regular measurement stick at each of your progress meetings in your group or your committee and say, where are we up to? And everybody gets on the same page because they can quickly see how you're progressing on this timeline. You could also change the colour of your little colouring in boxes from red to green or whatever as each task is completed. So just think about this as a way to order the flow of your work. Okay, the scary section for most of us is around the budget, the numbers. So the next main section that you will run across in a grant application is all about income and expenditure. Yep, this is creative accounting, because there's no, as I say, no right and wrong at this stage, but you need to start, again, taking off those rose-coloured glasses and being very realistic about where the money's going to come from and where it's going to go. So first off, I want you to think about all the sources of income, and we'll talk about all the costs in a second. So income, can you do some fundraising? Can you run a chook raffle or an event, a fete or whatever, to generate some additional money to go towards the project? Or have you actually got some cash in the bank already that you could contribute to the project? Could you be tapping council on the shoulder and say, we'd like to apply for a grant? Would people, private business, etc., give you a donation, or philanthropists in your community give you a donation? Could you apply at the same time for a federal or state grant to match what you're doing in the project? Or crowdfunding, set up a GoFundMe page or whatever. So you need to be very creative about where the money can come from. Why I say that is, again, that concept of competition. When you, again, you've got your application and somebody else's application, your application shows that you're kicking the can to $5,000 or $50,000, whatever that amount is, and the other application just says, give me the money. Theoretically, your application should be stronger, because straight away the funder can see that you've got skin in the game, you're committed to it being a success, and you're prepared to put your hand in your own pocket to make it a success. So it's a real competitive edge if you can match it in some way, add some money in some way. I know that's tough when you're a small not-for-profit, but it is really, really valuable if you can do it. The concept of in-kind support is also really important. So say you somebody donates some time to your project, whether that's an electrician comes along and does the wiring for free, or a plumber or whatever. That is an in-kind donation that you still need to put a dollar value on. So they might actually do, $5,000 worth of work and not charge you for it. That is actually $5,000 worth of income that you can put against your contribution as opposed to the government's contribution. So don't, we all work in community groups where everybody comes along and lends a hand at, say, at a working bee or something. You might have 10 people come along to a working bee and they work all day, 8 hours a day, 8 hours on a weekend, 10 people. You need to value that, cost that at $40 an hour. That's the standard dollar value for volunteer hours. So see what I'm doing here? All of a sudden, your contribution is growing and growing and growing, so that the government can see, or the funder can see, that you're not just saying, give me the money and I'll run away. So it's really, really important. So as I said there on the screen, if anybody gives you free advertising or marketing support or rent or whatever, all of that is a type of income. So don't minimise it. Even more important, that some grant applications will actually say you must match it 50-50. They will only give you 50% of the value of the project. So this is where this beg, borrow, steal approach comes to gathering all your income together. On the expenses side, I really encourage you to, if you're going to build stuff or whatever, or you're going to hire a venue, start getting quotes, start talking to tradies and getting them to give you an estimate of what it would cost to complete your project or to hire the venue or whatever. I mean, don't tell the tradies you haven't got the money yet. I'm not saying this we don't want to waste their time, because we know how busy people are to give quotes, etc. But you actually want to build a really realistic budget, and you can't do that without having some solid quotes to go there. So start talking to people about what it's going to cost. Going back to that point I made about the in-kind expenses. So if you're going to have a working bee to do something, yes, you're going to have those in-kind hours, but then you also have an in-kind expense. So if they're going to do 10 people for 8 hours at $40 an hour is being donated, given, it also needs to be charged out. So they need to balance, if you can get what I mean. So whatever comes in kind needs to be matched with an expense in kind as well. So think through absolutely every aspect of your project. Are there new insurances you've got to purchase, electricity, running costs? Are you going to employ additional staff members? So you've got all those sorts of costs. Everything needs to go into that expense budget. This expense, I mean, while we can all get really excited about our project, this is unfortunately a very grounding exercise, because it makes us pause and think, okay, this is the real cost of what we want to do. It might then encourage you, if you've got a large project, if you're not confident with kicking the whole thing off in the beginning, think about it as a multi-year project. So spread those costs over a number of years or a number of stages. So you might have a project that's actually going to cost $1.5 million or whatever it is. Waiting for a grant that will give you $1.5 million in one hit might be a long wait. However, if you can stage your project, you might have a much better chance of getting a $50,000 grant 1 year, a $400,000 grant the next year, a $400,000 grant the year after. So you're actually staging the development of your project over a number of years. So just think about how that would look. And if you're working in that Excel spreadsheet as well, and sometimes on that website, remember I said to download the guidelines and the applications, sometimes they actually have a budget template there as well. I really recommend you download that and put that into your Excel. And again, same as that Word document, just start slotting the numbers in there and seeing how it pans out. It will give you an idea of what you're really up for in reality. So now you should have a really clear picture of what your project's going to cost. You've also got a really clear picture of what income you can bring to the project, so to sweeten the pie, so to speak. The difference between the two is your grant ask. And that dollar value, so it might be in the leftover might be 50,000 or 5,000, whatever it is. That is now your measuring stick when you are looking at grant programs. I've seen people, and it's very easy to get excited. You see a grant and you go, oh my God, this is perfect. This is just what I want. But they're only offering 10,000 when you actually need 20. Unless you can chunk it down into stages, I really encourage you to keep your powder dry. Don't waste your time applying for a $10,000 grant if it won't help. And again, yes, if you can chunk your project down and go for 10,000, well then go for it. But otherwise, just keep your powder dry and wait for that perfect, $10,000, $20,000 grant to open up eventually. Okay, we're still going, remember, we're still working through our pretend grant application here, and we're back to that section I mentioned early on, a really important one called the assessment criteria. These assessment criteria will vary depending on the focus of the grant, but there's often 3 main headings here that you need to nail. Like, you really need to write strongly on each of these headings. And often they will say, it'll be either 3,000 characters or 2,000 words or whatever it is. So if they say 2,000 words, I really recommend you write 1,999 words without waffling and without fluffing around. Write 1,999 powerful words to sell your project. So the first often assessment criteria is around target beneficiaries. So this is talking about who's going to benefit from your project. And that's describing them in a whole range of different ways. So who are they? Where are they? Are they located within your council area, or are they neighbouring areas? How old are they? Are they, culturally and linguistically diverse? Are they old? Are they young? Are there a lot of them, or are they a small group? So you actually start to paint the picture of who's going to be on the receiving end of your project. And there's a couple of different levels here that funders will view your response. And one of them is very much around a value for money response. So if you are asking for $500,000, but in this target beneficiaries section, you're actually describing how your project is only addressing 1% of your community, that may not ring bells of concern, but that will be something that they will have in the back of their mind. This is the funders, again, when you're looking at that competition. If you're asking for $500,000 benefiting 1% of the community, and your competition is asking for $500,000 benefiting 50% of the community, they may perceive that the competition's application is better value for money. But just bear that in mind. I know sometimes it's hard to sort of, when you really need those dollars and you've got a very small group of people, I'm not saying that those group of people aren't important, but it is just something that funders will think about. These target beneficiaries will also indicate what sort of statistics you should start gathering. So really get into your census figures, go to council and get information about the community profile. Really support your argument with solid data. Don't just put the fluffy stuff in there about describing, how cute the kids are, etc. Actually talk about, the massive growth of the 3 to 5 year old group, age group of children within your community, if that's what your project's aiming for. So use this question to gather statistics. This target beneficiaries section will also highlight who you could potentially be getting letters of support from. So going back to that child example, if your project is about early childhood services or whatever, make sure you go and get letters of support from the preschools, from the paediatricians, from the primary infant schools, primary schools, etc. From the OTs and speechies or whoever's providing early intervention services. I'm just using that as an example, but those letters of support are so powerful if they can then say, yes, this project that's being proposed is going to be fantastic for our community. Very, very important. The next assessment criteria is often around the economic benefits. So how you're going to build and contribute to your local economy. Are you going to be creating jobs? Are you going to be attracting more tourists to your area? So that's people in beds and average spends and increasing money flow within your community, wages spend, etc. So think about the dollars, not only that you can generate from your project, but then also the flow of money from your project. So if you've got a big project, $500,000 budget, is $450,000 of that budget going to go straight back into your local community through purchasing supplies and trading, etc. So this section is all about the dollars. The other really frequent assessment criteria is around your capacity to deliver the project. So what skills and experience do you have or can you draw on in your group to make sure you deliver your project on budget and on time? And the focus of this is, again, really around reducing risk. So the funder is sitting there going, gee, will I give this group $500,000? That funder needs to be confident that you will do what you say you're going to do and you will do it on time. You're not going to take that $500,000 and skip off to the Bahamas, so to speak. Think about here, have you delivered projects like this before? Have you got a track record in project delivery? And even if it's only small, much smaller, so even if it's only a $50,000 project or a $25,000 project, don't discount that, because that's still there's still important skills involved in that. So you're still doing all your really tight financial management. You were doing your report writing, work health and safety issues. You managed all of those. So this is, don't discount the skills that you've got sitting around the table. If you haven't got key skills, and one of your committee members' partner is a lawyer or whatever, put that in there that you can actually draw on legal expertise, financial expertise, engineering, design, whatever it is, to again deliver this project on time and on budget, which is what they want to know. As I said before, each of these criteria are scored, and so it might be 25 marks a question. You want to be gathering as many marks as possible and earning as many marks as possible. So this is a very important and time-intensive section to write. The next section, and remember we were talking earlier about alliances and partnerships. If you're going to have join up and work with other groups on your project, this is where you pop the information in. It's usually quite a short section. They want contact details, but often they want a letter of support and outlining if they're going to be contributing any dollars. So, short section, but could take a little while to get a letter of support. So make sure you understand what you need to do in this section, if at all. If you're not going to join up with anybody else, you can just skip this section, no problem. The next one is around the supporting documents, and it is always the way, the larger the amount of money you're asking for, the more complex your project, more supporting documents required. And big projects will often ask for a full project plan to be attached to your grant application as well. So that's really a detailed document that discusses a lot of things like risk management. You might include, so you might have a risk management table in there. You might include more information about your project team, who's going to be running the project and accountable for it. You might be putting in more detail about designs and of what, if you're building something, more detailed budgets, etc. Any sort of financial analysis as well will all go into this project plan. So if you are thinking about working on a large project, also in a Word document, start doing your brain dump around a project plan as well. Another attachment is, if it's a big project, is that budget template I mentioned before, which you've already been working on. So you've done, all the legwork there. They will also ask for community support. And I can't emphasize enough how valuable and how powerful any sort of community consultation documents are. So those documents are the ones that say, we really need a project like this. Because you are working in advance, no grant, no worries, you have got time now to start surveying. Remember those target beneficiaries, the people that may be involved and benefit from your project? Start surveying them and finding out what they need. Might only be a quick Survey Monkey or something like that, but the information you gather is gold when attaching it to a grant application. And again, from a funder's perspective, it reduces risk around the fact that your project is really needed by your community. You just haven't dreamed it up overnight. So community consultation is so important. Similarly, if you know there's been newspaper articles talking about your issue, or any sort of research reports that are out there, grab those as well. And of course, those letters of support. The other issue is often they ask for, particularly if you're building stuff, is around land ownership or consent to deliver. So if you're on a site that you're just renting, or it's Crown lands, you actually often need permission to do something to change what's on that site. Bearing in mind, Crown lands, etc., may move very slowly, and it may take some time to get that letter of in principle support that yes, you're allowed to do this on this site. So what I'm encouraging you to do is start chasing these supporting documents early, having those conversations. It takes time to get your documents together. So that's basically the format of what I'm encouraging you to research, think and research and write about. And now we're going to talk about the when of no grant, no worries. And of course, I'm talking about now. Start now. As I said, before, this is a really big job and takes time. And there's no time like the present to start doing this brain dump. Bearing in mind, it doesn't need to be perfect now. Just make that start and start eating that elephant, as I mentioned before. you might feel sometimes that you're beavering away doing all this research and it's not actually going anywhere. You're not making any grounds, or the money's no closer, which is fair enough. But what you're actually doing is you're working strategically, you're working methodically through your project, and when that perfect grant program opens, you're good to go. So you're not wasting your time. The other really important thing to think about is, from a timing perspective, is leading into an election. So we are in the box seat in New South Wales because we have a state election in March 2023. So if you're planning something big or biggish, I would really be encouraging you to start work now and fleshing your ideas out. Once those ideas are done, are all formulated, that's when you start knocking on MPs' doors saying, have I got a deal for you? Have I got a winning project for you? Because we know MPs like to back winners, they like good news stories, and they'll certainly like solutions rather than going to them with a problem all the time. So March 2023 is when you need to be working towards. So going back to that concept of that perfect grant that we were doing our original research around the application and the guidelines, check it out when you're on the website and see if they had any previous rounds. So sometimes they will have a tab on there that says some previous successful applicants or previous round, etc. Straight away, that should flag to you that they run this multiple times a year, could even be every 6 months. So start to think about, okay, well, if I've missed this round, potentially I could be working flat out for them to be ready for the next round. If they don't actually say, opens again in October 2022, I'd give them a call. They might not be able to tell you anything. They might not have that information, or they might be able to say, look, yeah, we're pretty sure they're going to offer it again in October. So for the cost of the phone call, you might get some really valuable information. So make sure that you think about, okay, potentially the timing I should be aiming for. As I said, don't underestimate the size of this task. It is, if you do it properly, it's probably the same amount of work as writing the actual grant application. But what you're doing is you're getting yourself in a position to submit a really strong application if you start now. So the where. So think about the where of no grant, no worries. Where will you deliver your project? Are they ideal physical locations you could be researching? Are you land costs? Could you potentially buy something? You should be renting. What are the pros and cons of the different locations? Or are you going to run an event, and so you've got an opportunity to research different venues or public spaces? Or is it a mobile project you're going to be moving around? So think about the wheres of your project and start to get your options down on paper. The other thing to think about is where to find the grants. You've just done all this fabulous work, and you've now got a really strong project proposal, a clear framework for your project, how much it's going to cost, the timing, etc. Start thinking about where grant funds can be found. And what I encourage you to do is to think about how you get creative about how you can market your project or brand your project to fit into a number of different buckets. How can you skin this cat? So rather than waiting for $50,000 to develop a community garden, veggie patch, could you actually be thinking about, well, maybe I can badge this as a healthy eating child obesity project where we're going to teach children how to grow their own vegetables and eat healthily? Or is this community garden going to be an amazing resource for people with mental health issues, so they can come and work the soil and be supported and in a very non-threatening atmosphere? Or is there a way that we can look at including a whole section on Indigenous bush tucker and celebrating Indigenous culture and languages at this particular garden? So what I'm encouraging, or is there an environmental angle as well? You know, water-wise plants and ones that might re-veg or stop erosion, etc. So while that might sound a bit strange, what I'm encouraging you to think about is don't just sit and wait for the community garden bucket of money to open up. Think about, again, all those target beneficiaries, the people that could be using and benefiting from your project, and maybe you can get 10,000 here, 5,000 there, 10,000 there to actually bring your project to life eventually. So rather than waiting, 2 years to get your 50,000, maybe you can be chipping away, and by the end of the 2 years, your project's up and running. A couple of great resources to look at. The state government has just opened up their grant finder website, which is you can go in there and plug in what you're looking for, and it will spit out what's open or closed or what's available. So I really recommend you look at the New South Wales government grants. The federal government one is the same. It's very comprehensive. They've got obviously very big grants that are across the nation, but they do have a really great range of also community grants, not-for-profit grants, business grants, education, you name it, really worth a while. And you can sign up to an e-newsletter. I also recommend, if you like, you can sign up. I have a blog on my website where I share grant opportunities. So I just go in there and post anything that I see. I don't spam you. I mean, sometimes there'll be 5 in a week, sometimes there'll be none. It really depends on what comes across the desk. So so if you go to my website, it will show you what's there. Okay, so the who of No Grant, No Worries. Don't try and do this on your own. This is such a big project, and I really encourage you to share the load, especially if you're in a community group. You could be delegating sections of this writing, that Word document, sending it to other people and say, I want you to work on question 5 or whatever. Don't try and do it on your own. And I'm a great believer in, many brains, many perspectives to a problem can actually bring around a far more creative solution. So make sure you share the load, and build the buy-in from other people that they can be involved in this project development as well. It's a really great way to develop buy-in from your group into the project. A few final comments. Learn from your unsuccessful applications. If you submitted grant applications before, and if you got some feedback, sometimes they won't give you feedback, but if they gave you feedback on your project or application, make sure you review that and understand, okay, well, this is where I fell down last time. So this is what I need to do the next time I put an application in to really strengthen your project. And that could be, that could be actually something to do with the content of the project. There's something that didn't quite work, or it could be as simple as the fact that you didn't attach the documents that they asked for. So yeah, if you've had feedback, make sure you listen to it and fix it for next time. You've now, I want to say, congratulations. Theoretically, you've now got this amazing grant application ready to go, which is now a very comprehensive project brief. If you see a bucket of money you want to chase or apply for, look at your project proposal and look at the grant application and cut and paste. Don't think you've got to start your grant application from square one again. Customize it though. Just take the relevant sections out of this project proposal you've been working on, customize it slightly if needed, and put it into the application. So you've done, as I say, you've done all the legwork. Make sure that you use it. I also really encourage you to share it. Share this exciting opportunity with your influencers. Remember, I talked about going and knocking on our MPs' doors. You've done the work. You've got, your project inside out. You know the pros and cons and how much it's going to cost, etc. Make sure this doesn't now sit on a shelf. You need to get out there and work it. One thing I wouldn't recommend, if you've developed this amazing project proposal that's 47 pages, don't hit your MP with the 47 pages because you'll freak them out completely and they won't read it. Distill that 47 pages down to 2 pages, and then you can always say there's more information if you'd like it. So good luck, everybody. I encourage you to start work now, bring your dreams to life. There's so much passion out there. There's so much grant money out there you could be chasing if you're approaching in a really strategic way. So all the best with it all, and good luck and more power to you. Thanks a lot.